Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Nordic KickOff 2026. We're very excited to have you all join us today for this very, very exciting kickoff and with very amazing speakers. Let me go through some items in preparation for this 2-hour long session. First of all, I'd like to say that this event has been in close collaboration with the Embassy of Denmark in Vietnam, the Embassy of Finland in Hanoi, the Embassy of Norway in Hanoi, and the Embassy of Sweden in Hanoi, as well as our NordCham valued partner, DSV Global Transport and Logistics. In addition, NordCham would like to also extend thank yous to our program partner, InCorp Vietnam, as well as our co-hosts of our in-person New Year networking events that will take place right after this online session at Bartels in Ho Chi Minh City, for those that are in Ho Chi Minh City, and at the Embassy of Sweden in Hanoi. And I would be remiss to not mention final thanks to the NordCham board and members for always being in the forefront of engagement in Vietnam. I'm Christina Ammann. I am a sustainability strategist and advisor, previous board member of NordCham, Swedish, and continued supporter of all things Nordic in Vietnam. I'll be your moderator today. So Nordic KickOff marks the beginning of the new year for the Nordic business community in Vietnam. And under this year's theme, Doubling Down on Vietnam, expect bold predictions and thought-provoking insights from our distinguished guest. But before I proceed, I do have some practicalities that I'd like to share with you. So the first one I'd like to share is please remain on mute throughout the session to avoid disruptions. 2, the chat function is open for your questions and engagement throughout all the presentations. So I'll try my utmost best to tackle them with the speakers. Otherwise, if time doesn't allow it, the speakers will answer themselves as best they can when they're done after their session on the chat. To kick off and to practice this chat function, I do invite all of you to actually say a quick hello. So press the chat function at the top there and do say hello, write down your name, where you're from, what you're doing, or any comments and pieces of insights you'd like to share already now. Moving on, I'd like to take a moment to highlight our speakers and supporters today. So let me start by welcoming our ambassadors. We're honored to have with us His Excellency Pekka Voutilainen, Ambassador of Finland to Vietnam, who will be one of our speakers today. I would also like to welcome His Excellency Johan Ndisi, Ambassador of Sweden to Vietnam, host of our New Year reception in Hanoi, and His Excellency Nikolai Preutz, Ambassador of Denmark to Vietnam, host of the New Year reception in Ho Chi Minh City following this online session. We are truly grateful for your continued support of the Nordic business community in Vietnam. I would also like to take a moment to thank all of our speakers joining us today. We deeply appreciate your time and your willingness to share your insights and perspectives. Now let's get started. Our first session begins with opening remarks from Mr. Tue Quist Thomason, Chairman of NordCham, followed by His Excellency Pekka Voutilainen, Ambassador of Finland to Vietnam. So Tue, over to you. Let's see where you are.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Nordic KickOff 2026. 2026 has already kicked off geopolitically spicy. Across the world, large economies are turning inward. Protectionism is back. Industrial policy is back. Economic nationalism is back. And many of the free trade assumptions that have underpinned global growth since the Second World War are being questioned or quietly rolled back. For smaller yet open economies like the Nordics and for fast-growing, outward-looking economies like Vietnam, this is not abstract geopolitics. It directly affects how we trade, how we invest, and how we build supply chains and how we plan for the future. So the real question here today is not what is happening. The real question is, how do we respond? And that question sits at the heart of Nordic KickOff 2026. Because when big powers turn inward, smaller, open economies cannot afford to do the same. We don't win by retreating. We win by staying pragmatic, trusted, and connected. We win by doubling down on partnerships that actually work. And that is why Nordic-Vietnamese collaboration matters more than ever. The Nordics bring trusted institutions, long-term thinking, and world-class capabilities in areas like energy, life sciences, logistics, food systems, and not least sustainability. Vietnam brings growth, ambition, talent, and one of the most dynamic economies in Asia. Together, this is not just a good match, it's a highly relevant one for the world we're now operating in. So Nordic KickOff 2026 is about exactly that. Growth beyond geopolitics, practical collaboration, two-way trade, real partnerships between friends that trust each other. Before we dive into today's program, let me acknowledge a few people and partners who made this possible. First, my sincere thanks to the 4 Nordic embassies for their close and constructive collaboration with NordCham in organizing this Nordic KickOff 2026. Your continued support is absolutely essential, not just for this event, but for the broader Nordic presence and cooperation in Vietnam. I also want to give a very big thank you to the NordCham Vietnam team under the leadership of our new and very talented Executive Director, David Nguyen, that I'm sure a lot of you have already met for a coffee or cinnamon bun at Bartels. Otherwise, he owes you one. Putting together an event like this across embassies, sponsors, speakers, and members, it takes serious coordination, and the team here has really done an excellent job. Also, a very special thank you to Christina Amel for her strong support in moderating today's program. She tries to escape by moving from Vietnam to Australia, but we pull her right back in. Having a sharp and experienced moderator makes all the difference, especially when the topics are complex and fast-moving. Nordic KickOff 2026 is structured around 3 main activities. We start today with this online webinar running from 3:30 to 6 p.m. We will explore the economic outlook, the sector trends, and strategic priorities for the year. And we've really tried to construct this around some of the themes that we believe will shape the year ahead so that you get the absolute best start to 2026. Now, follow this are 2 New Year networking events where we take the conversation offline, reconnect in person, and turn insights into relationships, and ideally into business for many. So please take the opportunity to meet us in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City for a glass of champagne and a possibility to congratulate each other with another hopefully very successful year. I would also like to sincerely thank our partners. A big thank you to DSV, our main sponsor, for your strong and continued support of Nordic KickOff 2026. And for being so right about the predictions made last year, that I'm really looking forward to see what Eric has for us this year. Also, thank you to InCorp, our program partner, for helping shape and support today's agenda. And of course, a very warm welcome and thank you to all our speakers, your business leaders from across sectors, joining us to share practical insights on how companies are navigating uncertainty, seizing opportunities, and positioning ourselves for growth in 2026. That practical, experience-based perspective is exactly what this moment calls for. And with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our first speaker. We are honored to be joined by friend of NordCham, Ambassador Pekka Voutilainen, Ambassador of Finland to Vietnam, who will help set the scene for today's discussion and the year ahead. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you, Tue. I hope you all hear me.
We do indeed.
Greetings from Hanoi, where the 14th Party Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam is currently ongoing. The decisions on the future leaders of Vietnam is about to be made, and we'll hear about them shortly, perhaps tomorrow. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from very cold Hanoi. Comparatively speaking, in Helsinki it's -2. I guess the people in Hanoi they feel it that it's very cold. Ladies and gentlemen, partners of the Nordic and Vietnamese business communities, it's really a great pleasure for me to be here today, and congratulations on NordCham for this Nordic KickOff 2026. This is a great way to start the year. I'm very happy that there are a number of new Nordic companies, including Finnish companies, that have established themselves this year here in Vietnam, and more companies are expected to join. Vietnam already is, for Finland, it's the largest trading partner in Southeast Asia. Finnish investments in Vietnam are close to 2 billion euros. So it's not insignificant for a small country like Finland. So it's looking great. Vietnam, obviously, we had here 8% GDP growth last year, and the GDP went over $5,000 per capita, which is a great achievement. This year and next, they forecast even higher growth. So Nordic cooperation, it's based on shared values. Value sustainability, innovation, transparency, and inclusive growth. It shouldn't be too difficult to generate buy-in for these values. And I think we have, with being one of the happiest countries in the world, we are doing something right. And I think it all goes down to values, how we are, how we see life, how we see work, how we see friendships. So I think this is very important, especially now it's a turbulent world. We don't know where it's going every day, and every morning, every afternoon seems to be somewhat different. Year 25, it was a significant milestone in bilateral relations between Finland and Vietnam. We had Secretary General Tor Lam visiting Finland with a delegation of 350 people, 10 ministers and around 100 companies. And we had also very big successful business seminar where Secretary General and the big delegation also stayed throughout the whole seminar. Actually, we thought that he might be there for 15 minutes, but he ended up staying there for the duration of the seminar, 2 hours. So this was, I think, quite an achievement. We have had increased cooperation in number of sectors, and now Finland, as a first Nordic country, we do have a strategic partnership with Vietnam. Maybe some other countries will follow at some stage. And Vietnam obviously continues to be a key partner for Finland and all Nordic countries in the region. And together we are expanding cooperation in critical areas such as green transition, clean energy, circular economy, sustainable technologies, digitalization, innovation, and of course education and healthcare, among those sectors, to name a few. I don't know where you put Lego, and I think it can be put in several boxes over there. These domains represent both natural priorities for Vietnam and areas where Nordic countries can best contribute and work together with Vietnam. So it's a win-win. It's win-win for both. So there is no losers in this. Nordic businesses, they have long played and will continue to play an important role in Vietnam's development. And it looks really bright. If we will receive 10% growth this year, and the target being an industrialized country by 2045, that's an ambitious goal for Vietnam. And long-term commitment from Nordic partners, adherence to responsible business practices, responsible employment practices, and contributions to skills development and innovation, they are very important pieces in the puzzle when describing our cooperation between Nordic countries and Vietnam. And I would also like to recognize and acknowledge the role of NordCham as a bridge connecting governments and businesses and linking Nordic expertise with many opportunities which are emerging in Vietnam. And I would be speaking on behalf of the Nordic diplomatic community as well. We deeply value the cooperation with cooperation and partnership with NordCham, and we remain committed to strengthening our cooperation with Vietnam in 2026 and beyond. Well, thank you very much, and I wish you a very productive, successful, and inspiring year ahead. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I really have a key takeaway is shared values and that there's a possibility of win-win for all of us. A very warm welcome to you, and thank you again for your opening remarks. Thank you, Tuve, as well. Now we're moving on to our next session, which is the start of our presentations. We are very excited to have one focused on accelerated growth and economic resilience, and that we have two speakers. We start off with Eugenia Fabon-Victorino, Head of Asia Strategy at SAB Bank, followed by an insight section with Ms. Hang Vu, CEO of RSI Consulting Asia. But let me first welcome Eugenia Fabon-Victorino from SAB, who will share her perspectives on Vietnam's economic growth outlook, as well as resilience across the broader Asia region. So, Eugenia, do I see you online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, and this is very exciting. I cannot see. Oh, now I see you. Wonderful. Well, welcome, Eugenia. I'm handing the screen and stage over to you, and we're very excited for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Christina. I am very honored to have been invited to join in this kickoff by the Nordic Chambers of Commerce. I was told to be very strict on time and just keep it at 10 minutes. So I only have 3 conclusions for you today, and I hope that I keep it as simple as possible from here. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Yes. So first of all, my main message is that in 2026, Vietnam was really a surprise considering the chaos we had seen last year. And I'm talking about the resilience. The exports are actually stronger than expected. And in fact, the exports to the US were even more resilient than in 2024. Having said that, there is a high risk that is coming from that. The fact that it was very strong in the US makes Vietnam's export basket lacking in diversity, not only in markets and in products. So as much as it is a strength for Vietnam, it is also a source of weakness. Now, one way to keep Vietnam's exports competitive here onwards, and not just in 2026, is to keep the currency competitive. In that sense, we actually need to focus on the competitiveness of the dong against a particular currency, and I will talk about that later on. Next slide, please. So as I said, exports in Vietnam once again surprised to the upside, and it reached more than $470 billion in 2025. Almost 23% went only to computers and components, but it's also very interesting that we have around 36% of the basket going into the other section. For other countries, when you look at the basket of exports, there seems to be more diversity. Years ago, I would say maybe 10 years ago, Vietnam had a more diverse product basket, but that hasn't been the case in the last 5 years. And that probably is a result of the first trade war. Everybody knows that Vietnam was one of the main winners of the trade war between US and China in 2018. And that has resulted in the export basket that we are seeing right now. But maybe being too much of a winner from that trade war is actually now a weakness. Next slide, please. If you look at the major markets, at the beginning of last year, it was already quite concerning that almost 30% of exports from Vietnam go to the US. But in 2025, despite the unexpectedly high tariffs on Vietnam, exports to the US now make up 32% of exports. So previously it was already concentrated in the US, and now it's even more concentrated. And this is because exports of Vietnam to the world rose 17%, but exports to the US alone went up 28%. To some degree, that is very impressive because despite having higher tariffs, it rose even faster. But you see, in this environment of geopolitical issues, the key here is to keep your markets diverse, because that is actually what China did years ago. So should there be another round of trade war, it is very difficult to see Vietnam going unscathed should it become a target of the US going forward. But at this time, it seems very resilient. Looking at the next slide, please. If you look at the major products, most of the exports of Vietnam are actually now related to computers and parts. And in fact, if you look at it, computers and parts have risen more than 40% year on year for the whole world. But a lot of that went to the US. And in fact, previously, exports to the US or computer parts that go to the US were actually only 19% of export basket in 2024. By the end of 2025, exports to the US that were related to computer products are now 27%. I am not sure if that is because Vietnam is going up in the value-added chain, and that is why the value of these exports have gone up. But I am a little bit concerned by the fact that exports of other products have been stagnating. It is okay, or it is very good if you see the high value add products going up, but at the same time, exports of textiles and garments or even agriculture continue to go up, because that is telling you that the production possibility frontier of Vietnam is going up in general.
But if only one product is rising, that may be a cause of concern. Either this is a reflection of a very concentrated move of the foreign direct investments, or there is now a transition away and some sectors in the economy have to go down just to make way for computers and other electronics. What we want to see is you have to have a diverse growth so that if there is a change in the demand in one sector, other products can actually offset the weakness. Why is this very important? Even if there were to be no trade war that would implicate Vietnam in 2026, the issue here is what happens to Vietnam's exports if there is a bust in the AI boom. One of the reasons why there is very strong exports, not only in Vietnam, but for Asia, is because the semiconductor story is definitely benefiting from the AI investment. Everybody's talking about the very high valuations of AI-related stocks. And the risk here is if you have a bust, which would then have an impact on the major semiconductors, the partners of Vietnam, that would have an impact on more than 30% of Vietnam's exports. So we need to see the other sectors grow in 2026. Not that we want the exports of computers and electronics to go down. We want that to continue growing, but we also want to see the other sectors contribute to the overall growth. Next slide, please. But one of the main reasons why exports would have to be competitive is to look at what is happening to the exchange rate. Previously, when Vietnam was running trade deficits, we had seen a number of times when the dong would depreciate or devalue. In 2025, the Vietnam dong was actually one of the worst performing currencies in Asia Pacific. But that was actually a policy decision. To be fair, the dollar had already started to go down in 2025, and yet the dong was underperforming the region. That is very good policy response, because if you look at what is happening in the currencies of other markets or other partners of Vietnam, that is changing the story. Next slide, please. So in 2025, we had seen the dong as a basket in comparison to the currencies of its major trading partners. It went down by around 6%. Now, I'm not talking about dollar-dong exchange rate. I'm talking about the dong in comparison to the currencies of its major trading partners. So on the left-hand chart, you can see that both the nominal and the real effective exchange rate went down by around 6%. What is real effective exchange rate? That is taking into consideration the impact of inflation. So you may think that yes, the dong had already depreciated. But if you look at what has happened to the Chinese yuan, which is actually the biggest source of Vietnam's imports, the yuan had depreciated in inflation-adjusted terms by more than 15% since 2022. In 2026, it is important that the dong underperform the yuan. Otherwise, it would make it very difficult to continue to gain market share, at least as far as specific exports go. So the point here is, next slide, please. The conclusion here is the outlook for the dong should not just be taken in consideration against the dollar. You must also look at what is happening to the yuan dong exchange rate. For the past 2 years, that has gone up, but it hasn't gone up enough to slow down the flow of imports from China. As much as exports to the US went up, imports from China has gone up faster. So one way to make the export or the trade basket of Vietnam more diverse, the dong needs to play a role. That's it for me.
Wow, Eugenia, thank you so much. You are so on point. I know that many of the audience will want to follow up with some additional questions or want to gain some more insights. I do have a quick question to wrap it up. As you see on the screen, you're getting lots of hearts and lots of clapping and thumbs up. I have a question for you. What is, I guess, the biggest opportunity and the biggest risk you see for Vietnam this year following your presentation?
I think 2026 could actually be a year for Vietnam to become one of the top 5 semiconductor fab hubs in the world. Right now, Vietnam is already one of the top 5 for chip manufacturing. But to go up the value-added chain, it may be the year for Vietnam to go into the top 5 for semiconductors. At this point, the top 5 are actually Korea, China, Taiwan, Singapore, and Malaysia. Vietnam is an emerging country in that sense, but maybe it can get more market share from Singapore and Malaysia this year. As for the risk,
yes, please.
The biggest risk is if we have a bust in the AI investment, because that's going to hurt quite a bit for Vietnam.
And Eugenia, in that, would you like to have a moonshot prediction? It can be personal, it can be professional, to sort of wrap up your time with us.
I guess my moonshot is really to make Vietnam one of the top 5, but that would require continued investments. And I'm not just talking about FDI investments. We need to see sustained investments from the government, not only capital investments, but also in investments in skills upgrading and education. We need to see more engineers from Vietnam to get that moonshot moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eugenia. We can give a round of applause. I think most of you have seen the little icon you can press at the top. Thank you, Eugenia. We look forward to welcome you again to our next event. With that, I'd like to move on to Ms. Hang, who will be presenting the insight session on accelerated growth and economic resilience. Ms. Hang Vu is the managing partner at RSI Consulting. Welcome, Ms. Hang.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you, and we look forward to hearing your insight in the next couple of minutes. So I will hand over the screen to you.
Thank you, ambassadors, NordCham chairmen, and members of NordCham business communities. I'm Hang Vu from RSI Consulting Asia. We are offering 3 key services: strategic advisory for international companies exploring Vietnam, curating investment and capital flows into Vietnam, and also country representations for international companies wishing to have a presence in Vietnam, but without having to set it up themselves. So next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'd like to very excitingly share with you that Vietnam has now IFC, International Financial Center. It's officially given birth by the on the December 21st. So basically a month old IFC. Next slide, please. This is actually one of the most important milestones for us last year, and paving the way for capital flows to enter Vietnam and finance our developments in the next phase. So we have dual destinations, IFC, which Ho Chi Minh City, being the comprehensive financial powerhouse, aim to attract financing institutions such as banking, capital markets, asset management, and insurance, with an aim to finance the large-scale developments in the Southeast regions and elsewhere in the countries. While at the same time, Da Nang is aimed to be a center for fintech, green finance, carbon credits, derivatives, and all kinds of innovations in the kind of next gen technology. Next slide, please. For the Ho Chi Minh City IFC, it would be located in a very strategic location right next to the Central Business District, which is District 1, beyond the Saigon River. And the core area consisted of almost 900 hectares, covering a part of CBD and vast areas that would be attracting major investors to build towers, financial towers here. And we have 3 phases of implementations, which for now we already have the comprehensive legal frameworks for the IFCs, which with very attractive incentives for foreign investors, ranging from tax incentive. Corporate tax income is as low as 10% for as many as 30 years. And personal income tax for personal incomes and capital gains, as well as visa and residency privilege to attract high quality talents from overseas to work and live in Vietnam, as well as an unprecedented flexible operating environment, allowing international companies to have their own financial reporting systems and very liberal transfer of capital and profits going in and out of the countries. So it's very, very unprecedented and attractive for the very first time in Vietnam. Next slide, please. And we are attracting financial institutions to set up in the IFCs to for the capital to flow in the 5 key pillars: the international maritime, aviation, energy, digital assets, and tourism. So let me elaborate in the next slide, please. As you can see here is a map of part of Ho Chi Minh City and Dong Nai, which together form a Southeast region economic growth engines. So we have a cluster here of the IFC in the red area of Ho Chi Minh City, where we aim to become a financial and technology hub. And we have a yellow area here consisting of the core international, the new international Long Thành International Airport, and the so-called Aerotropolis, the airport cities that we have a master plan to build around the new airport, and alongside with the aviation hub to attract the major aviation players to this region, and the upcoming free trade zone, which already have the zoning for developments and attracting the developers and investors. We have the blue area here consisting of all the deep sea port clusters of Thị Vải, Cái Mép, Phú Mỹ, and An Phước ports here. So together with the air logistic hub, we aim for this area to become the new global gateway in the supply chains. And furthermore, we have a whole stretch of the coastal line in these purple clusters, ranging all the way from Vũng Tàu to Hồ Tràm and La Gi, and aim to become a tourism hub. And this will be also Vietnam's competitive edge compared to other regions such as regional hubs such as Singapore and Hong Kong, because we have more land to develop and to make this whole global gateway a very livable an attractive place to attract global citizens and expats. Next slide, please. So in the limit of this presentation, I would like to share some very brief and initial proposal for Nordic business community to consider. Next slide. Pillar. So overall, we are transitioning our value propositions from a cheap labor destination to be a green execution hub for high-tech manufacturing and logistics. So the opportunity we present anchored in the political and economic stability in highly volatile Asia-Pacific regions, and coupled with our strong commitment to net zero by 2050, as committed in COP26. So the big ask here, ladies and gentlemen in the room, we seek investment partnership in 3 key areas that we think are a perfect fit for the Nordic communities. One is offshore wind energy, 2, smart logistics and maritime, and 3, green finance and carbon market. Let me elaborate further. Next, please. So pillar 1 is all about energy, as we would need a lot of energies to power our double-digit economic growth in this year and beyond. So with
Ms.
Nordic,
Hang, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know there are 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Yeah. So pillar 1 is for sustainable energy, and especially for offshore. Next. Next slide. Pillar 2 is for green maritime and logistics, as we sit in one of the world's busiest maritime routes. So especially the sea and air logistic hubs that I mentioned earlier. Next. Last but not least is about green financing. So we are talking about ESG market and carbon credit, which we seek opportunities to cooperate in establishing Vietnam's carbon credit exchange and provide international verification and valuation services. Next, please. The roadmap is pretty much vary from sectors to one sector to another, so I would not elaborate on this. So my final slide, and my final slide is that pretty much the time is now, because with all this IFC and a lot of mega developments going on, we really think that it's time for EU now to enter Vietnam, form strategic partnerships, explore or even sign MOU or even commit a few projects before the landscape becomes structured and competitive. So I would love to share more about the different opportunities and projects we have at the networking sessions in Ho Chi Minh City. Thank you for having me. Back to you, Christina.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hang. I just already have on our chat function, which from Naveed, that says great presentation, which just really showcased this deep dive that you've done into Southeast Vietnam's role as an institutional and connectivity hub is very interesting and resonating very much with the audience. Before I let you go, Ms. Hang, I know we had discussed very briefly about what is your prediction for 2026? And it can be both personal or professional, but we'd love to hear your insight for it before I fully let you go.
Thank you. For me, I strongly believe that 2026 is the year of acceleration in Vietnam. So last year is pretty much the year of foundational, laying a very strong institutional and legislative foundations to power the next growth. So this particular year is the year that we accelerate the growth, and we already have a list of very strategic investment opportunities and projects that we curate very well for for European and especially the Nordic, which always comply with the higher standards. So we look forward to discussing more with you those bankable and executable opportunities on the ground here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hang. A round of applause for Ms. Hang. And I let you go, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience will be chasing you either on the chat, via email, or probably picking up the phone to give you a call. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now we're moving on to our next session, which is manufacturing, upgrading, and supply chain diversification. But actually, I'm going to bring Eric Herding, who is the Senior Vice President, Air and Sea Mekong Delta at DSV. You're on screen with me. So if we can actually get the slideshow off, I want him on screen. Can you spotlight the two of us? Because why I'm putting a little bit of pressure on you. Rosie, can you take the presentation and spotlight both of us? So I'm going to put a little bit pressure on you, Eric, because those that were not here last year when we did the Nordic KickOff, well, this is the thing. He did another brilliant presentation last year. And what was additionally impressive was that his moonshot prediction for 2025 was actually spot on. So I think it's a little bit fair, Eric, that we're going to put that pressure on you today so that we'll hear if it all comes through later this year. But what I'll wrap up as I hand it over to you, no pressure, Eric. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Christina. So no pressure, just feeling a little bit warm here under the spotlight. So I'll endeavor to do my my best to maybe share something a little bit thought-provoking for the audience today.
That sounds great. I will ask Rosie to put your presentation back on, and the stage is yours, Eric.
Okay, thank you very much, Christina. So I'm Eric. Thank you very much for the opportunity here today on behalf of DSV. We're very excited to sponsor this event and take everyone through a little bit of our thinking on how we're looking at, the big picture in the global perspective, what we see happening really on a Vietnam level, what we're doing about it in DSV, and then how we see, our supply chain markets evolving over 2026. So especially if you're in the business of international trade and working with a global supply chain, global value chain, I hope that you find the presentation very interesting. And if you're not, then hopefully you find it very interesting as well. Over the last 2 months, I've been preparing for this day in a way. I've been listening for signals with my travels around the world. I spent about a month in North America. I visited about a dozen or so of our biggest customers over there across, a geography like Toronto, the Midwest in the US, the West Coast. I was in Mexico. I was on the East Coast in the US talking to customers in a diverse range of industries, not only computer parts and technology. We're still seeing good development with other industries as well. And then last week I was in Denmark for DSV's Leadership Summit. I was there with 300 of my colleagues, and we got a lot of really interesting information from our top management, also some guest speakers, economists, futurists, human resources professionals, even a SAS commando came and shared some insights on leadership and so on. So it's been a very interesting perspective. And then to top all of that off, I think over the last week, I've been quite entertained and enthralled by the events at the WEF and some of the evolving negotiations that are near to our hearts in the Nordics. And many of also I'm Canadian, but working for a Danish company. So I think we have a lot in common at the moment. Not just the colors on our flag between Canada and Denmark. So very interesting times indeed. So let's jump ahead. Okay, the first headline that I wanted to talk about is what I call geoeconomic dystopia. When we look at, the macro, I think we got a really good picture of the macro for Vietnam and the globe earlier on. But for the micro, rules are written faster than leaders can react in our businesses, and I think everyone's felt that to some extent. The superpowers of the world and governments are making decisions that are geared up to win a power battle somehow on the big stakes global political stage. But all of these things have micro level consequences felt by businesses and cargo owners. And I think that this, frankly speaking, economic warfare has a big impact on the supply chains, and it has a big impact on DSV and our customers as well. So we're seeing currency power shifts that was highlighted a little bit earlier on. For example, the USD and SWIFT could be usurped by the yuan and digital yuan on regional trade here in Asia, for example. Protectionism, not only tariffs, but a lot of other mechanisms. Even some of the sustainability requirements require a certain level of compliance in order to trade at competitive levels between Asia and Europe, for example. We see the topic of critical minerals. We understand that China has a stranglehold on the supply of that, and that these industries like electric vehicles and technology are entirely dependent on the supply of those critical minerals. And I think it's no stretch to say what's happening with Greenland now is also, in part connected to this topic for sure. Technology infrastructure, I was listening to a panel on the WEF earlier, and one of the big investment firms, I don't know if it was BlackRock or something like that, they mentioned that these tech companies have an 800 billion investment in CapEx into the facilities for data centers and that kind of thing coming up in 2026 alone. So you can imagine a lot of that is land and construction, but the supply of everything that goes inside those data centers exclusively basically comes from Asia. And then a lot of that's coming from Vietnam. And that's why we're seeing such a rise in share of our exports attached to that specific commodity. And we also see that the marketing campaigns linked to social media and AI have an incredible impact potentially in terms of accelerating sales of one consumer product or another. So it's a totally different landscape that we need to prepare ourselves for. And what we see now, especially, advantage to the big guys in a way. So in this environment, scale is not just an advantage, it's also a shield against these kind of things. So big companies can weather the storm, and it takes a very careful planning from everyone to navigate in this particular environment. We can go to the next one. In Vietnam, the competitive advantage is no longer just the factory, it's the compliance intelligence behind it. So what we're seeing in Vietnam is, the final assembly, and I think that's a very smart point that's been raised earlier on. In 2018 trade war, final assembly of the products have come to Vietnam, and that's taken some time over COVID and everything to reach full potential. And in a way, 2025 was the year where that did reach its full potential, but the value chain lags behind. So a lot of the materials and equipment, etc., are coming from China still. So that's why we see this, correlated or connected curve of increased exports and increased imports from China. It's not Chinese consumer goods necessarily that are coming in to drive that curve up. It's all of the final assembly that is being exported out of Vietnam relies on parts, equipment, materials, supplies coming from China in particular. So that brings about its risk. We understand the term transshipping and potentially risks around that topic. And I think it's imperative now, as I write here at the bottom, business leaders will be required to assess and understand the implications of the entire value chain to execute the critical decisions that support risk mitigation strategies. So if you need a certificate of origin, you need to understand your raw materials, where they're coming from, what percentage of them form the final product. We've got an example where an investigation into the validity of a certificate of origin in Mexico comes back to a factory in Vietnam, and a certificate of origin is withdrawn, and they can't apply that for import into Japan. That kind of situation is a real life example that what can happen now in the market. So, you know, there's a priority for business leaders to pay particular attention on that topic. We can go to the next slide, please, Christina. In today's geoeconomic landscape, the winners aren't the fastest movers, but they're the best interpreters. So for me, I work as a freight forwarder. I think over the last few years, supply chain and freight forwarding is a little bit more known across, you know, what happened, especially during the COVID period. But when asked at a party or at an event, what do you do? I often use the example to say, you know, when you want to do a trip, you book with a travel agent, and then they take care of everything so that you can get your tickets, hotels, visa organized. And that's basically what DSV does for international transportation. We take care of everything from start to finish for you. Now, when I'm asked the question, my answer changes a little bit. We're doing that as well. I mean, that's still a really important part of our service to, you know, reliably move things at budget on time, 99% of the time. But what else we need to do is really look at our market and our business like a hedge fund manager would look at their portfolio of stocks. So we are constantly preparing for the future capacity that our customers need. We're listening for these signals in the market on the supply and demand side to determine what level of capacity we need at what validities, at what point in the year, in order to capitalize on the business and provide the most reliable and long-lasting service for our customers, and of course to make the best business possible for our company. So it becomes really, I guess, timely that we have this kind of review, because, you know, the way that this presentation is sort of playing out is really how we're thinking in our business about the markets and what's going on in the world today. So we also really highlight the point here that business leaders must distinguish between noise and signals. I think there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of, you know, 24-hour news cycles. There's a lot of data points that can distract, but we've got to really listen for those more subtle signals on what's happening in the markets and what we have coming at us in the future. We'll move on to the next one, please, Christina. So from that perspective, you know, we look at the next disruption doesn't necessarily come from demand, as it maybe has in the past with an e-commerce boom a couple of years ago coming out of China, but it comes more from the rules. You know, there's capacity mismatches now, for example, in sea freight, and I'll give you an example. So there's a lot of new capacity, new vessels that are coming into the market. That adds about 6% global supply with new vessels, but removing the existing capacity is very difficult because there's very stringent rules on how vessel owners can scrap their vessels, and it's very expensive to put the vessels on hold. So what might end up coming out of this is the only way to mitigate that impact is to go a little bit slower, because then you actually take supply out of the market. So that could be a signal on what's to come, as we don't expect the global supply, the global demand for sea freight to rise very much. On the other hand, on air freight, we're looking at a situation where all of this AI technology investment is really fast demanding stuff, and they're going to need a lot of air freight capacity, but the likes of Boeing and Airbus are unable to deliver their aircraft on time. So there's no new capacity, or very little new capacity coming on air freight side, but maybe a higher demand. So that could be more constrained, and maybe higher prices on the air freight side, lower prices on the sea freight side is something to look out for in the year to come. There's regulatory shockwaves that prepone shipments, postpone shipments, people looking at bonded facilities at border crossings to insulate from risks on that side. And then I think certainly value chain bottlenecks, especially where these global powers look to sort of press where it hurts, shall we say. And, you know, if this trade and economic warfare between China and the US escalates to a point, we could see China potentially withholding critical minerals or something like that, or metals back, and, you know, putting pressure on, and then you end up with a huge bottleneck potentially on the chip industry or something along those lines. So all of those risks need to be assessed and mitigated. So our message here is we need to build resilience with agility. We need to understand the signals and act accordingly. And we really see that, you know, where in the past we have, you know, suppliers and customers, shippers and consignees, sometimes working in competition with each other to squeeze the most. I think a partnership approach to build in that agility is really critical in 2026. Finally, maybe just to sum up the last 4 points from my presentation, I don't know how I'm doing for time, Christina, if I'm still on track. You know, our key messages for the year to come: adaptability. The world is becoming geoeconomically weaponized, and companies must adapt. I think that's a key point here. Vietnam's upstream evolution. Vietnam is attractive but complex, and the complexity is moving upstream. So can Vietnam capitalize on the final assembly and bring more ecosystem and, I guess, reliability of the Vietnam production onshore and diversify away from China? That's a big question mark for me. From a DSV perspective, we are moving away from just being a mover to an interpreter as well. We need to listen to our customers, listen to the market, listen to the factors to build a more resilient and stable capacity for what's to come at 2026. And certainly agility in a regulatory-driven world. So supply chains face mismatches and regulatory shocks. Agility is essential in order to be successful in 2026. So hopefully you found that interesting enough.
Fantastic, Eric. We've already got a question for you from Hanoi, who is asking here, you state that scale is a shield. In practical terms, where does that leave companies without scale, and what is the most realistic way for them to build equivalent protection? Would you have, I know this is not your background, but what would you say in your perspective?
Well, I would make a little plug for DSV here, of course.
Yeah.
DSV, we celebrate our 50th anniversary this year, and we have grown into the world-leading logistics provider. We're the largest 3PL in the world now. We've grown from a very stable operational platform, efficient and productive, and organically, and especially through mergers and acquisitions, into the world's largest provider. So we definitely can support our customers with a scale, with the global coverage, with the network all over the world to, dig into and look into the challenges on the regulatory front, keep you updated with market updates and that kind of thing. But I think, you've got situations like, for example, in the US where, there's sort of a challenge on the courts about tariffs and higher duty rates that have been imposed in the last, and certainly we see the larger companies that have got those big legal, budgets able to probably get a leap ahead and lobby for preferential tariffs or trade relations and all of that kind of thing. So, we can support businesses from any size in the journey that's coming at us here.
Thank you, Eric. So we've got 30 seconds for you to answer the final question. And the question, what is your moonshot prediction for 2026?
Well, I'm hoping to have a sort of a positive spin on things here. I think that when the dust settles, we're going to have a very interesting cooperation agreement between the US and Europe and Denmark on Greenland. Greenland is super strategic for the West. China and Russia are building shipping routes through the Arctic. There's a security concern, of course, with Russia, and it's imperative in the end that there's a proper cooperation here on this front, and I expect that to be something that comes out of all of this topic. I hope it comes in a very cooperative way. I believe it will come in a very cooperative way. And I think, I'm not saying that DSV will be opening an office in Greenland in 2026, but, that might not be too much of a surprise. And finally, it's the Winter Olympics. And I know we're here with our good friends in the Nordics, and maybe my comments especially directed at the Swedish and Finnish colleagues on the call, but Canada will win the gold medal in the ice hockey. Thank you very much.
I think you might get a lot of comments in the chat section, but thank you so much, Eric, for that. A round of applause for Eric. This was really wonderful. And let's see if he actually wins the moonshot prediction for 2026 for the Nordic Kickoff. We'll find out. Now we're moving to the next session, which is not really quite far off. We are focusing on people skills and FDI, the workforce dimension of Vietnam's supply chains. And we welcome Mr. Jack Nguyen, CEO of InCorp. And we know that the critical factor for every business is people. So Jack, welcome, and we're delighted to have you here today, and we look forward to your presentation. The screen and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. And it's an honor and a pleasure for me to join the Nordic Kickoff today and be here and share some of my slides with NordCham members. If we can start with my slide, please. Yeah, a brief background for me. I'm actually a Vietnamese Canadian, so I'm not sure how two Canadians get to present on the Nordic Chamber event back to back, but there must be a reason for that, and I'm sure there's more Scandinavians lined up to speak later on. So I was born in Vietnam, but grew up in Canada, in Toronto, actually. My background is a CPA from the Big Four. I've been back in Vietnam altogether 19 of my 30 professional years. So 19 years in Vietnam. My first tour was in 1998. And as you can imagine, Vietnam was a very different country back then compared to where it is now. I would say back in the 1990s, it was probably a few years ahead of North Korea, maybe. But Vietnam is well on its way in the past 25 to 30 years. I am currently head of country CEO for InCorp. Next slide, please. So InCorp, quickly, is a one-stop solution corporate and business service provider. We work with foreign companies that are planning to enter Vietnam as well as operating in Vietnam. We provide market research, market entry services, as well as compliance, tax, legal, HR, and payroll. HR and payroll is a service that we do, one of our core services, which is probably why I've been asked to speak today on people skills and FDI, the workforce dimension of Vietnam's supply chains. Next slide, please. Yeah, so FDI's role in Vietnam's supply chain. I mean, Vietnam's role in global supply chain has evolved, as you can imagine, over the last 30 plus years that Vietnam has opened its door. When Vietnam first welcomed FDI into the country, most of the manufacturing that came into Vietnam were very low skill, low education required in the textile and garment industry. But as of this year, Vietnam is no longer considered a very low-skill manufacturing industry. So in 2026, the intersection of foreign direct investment and human capital is a primary driver of the country's economic resilience. And it's coming to a head, actually, because Vietnam, over the last 5+ years, has moved up into the higher value, higher skill manufacturing chain. Okay, and that's where talent and skill requirements are really coming to a head and what the market can offer in Vietnam. If we look in 2025, as you see on my screen, FDI inflows into the country was $38 billion, right? And most of that, over half of that, goes into the manufacturing and processing. And the key industry where the industry that are attracting FDI are in electronics, in semiconductor, in high skill, in the high skill value chain in manufacturing. So and a lot of this is coming from the China Plus One principle, if you will. So Vietnam had a strategic diversification in the last few years. It has successfully captured the supply chain shifts from China, but the competition really has moved in from available land to available talent. There's a sectorial shift. FDI, like I mentioned before, is no longer in the garments and the footwear, but it's surging in semiconductors, electronics, and clean energy, which require a fundamentally different skill set. That needs to be talents that has to go through a proper vocational training to be able to do work in these industries. So over 35% of Vietnam's total employment is now linked to global supply chain. So think about that. 35% of Vietnam's total employment is linked to global supply, representing a massive integration into the world economy. From a Vietnam perspective, if you look at my chart here, there's a lag in skills upgrading. A large share of FDI workforce still hold below college qualifications, so limiting their movement into the higher value or technical roles that are coming into the country. There's a training gap that are persisting. Not all FDI firms are systemically training their staff properly. Or put in the money or investing in training their staff. And so many rely on existing low skill labor, which is limiting the capability development. Next slide, please. So the workforce bottleneck. So this is where supply chains actually break. So the skills gap, there's a double-edged sword. Okay, so the Vietnam faces what I call the paradox of success. While FDI inflows reached record heights, 38 billion in 2025, the demand for high-skilled labor outpaces supply. There's a 20 to 30% shortage of engineers specialized in digital and automation skills. And this is an area where Vietnam needs to really step up. And in my later slide, in my later notes, I will show how the Vietnamese government is investing in education, in vocational training for Vietnamese in Vietnam. I read somewhere yesterday where they were comparing a number of AI or tech engineers that are graduating in China compared to the US, and the number is just phenomenal. In China alone, 1.5 million engineers graduate in AI space, tech space, where in the US it's really lagging behind. There's I think 200,000 are graduating in the US, way behind China. But in Vietnam, that number is even lower. But as you know, as we've been hearing and reading in the past months and years, the Vietnamese government wants to move into the more of the high value, high tech space in the semiconductor, in electronics. And this is where education in engineering is very much required, and investments need to be made as well. Hang mentioned earlier that Vietnam wants to open 2 IFC, right, effective very near future. There's also a talent need for finance. in investment as well. And there's also a labor shortage, labor gap in that area as well. So
Jack, I'm just jumping in here. You have 2 minutes left, please.
Okay, next slide, please. So where the data show is that, FDI has not translated to faster skill upgrading. So FDI is really deepening export integration, but there's a gap in data in the investment in education. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's a structural opportunity for Vietnam can still capture. There's a clear shift from traditional labor-intensive role to higher value positions. For example, process engineers, supply chain planners, data-driven logistics. These are specialized areas that vocational training is needed. So without rapid upskilling, routine jobs will disappear fast, and the workers cannot transition to a higher value wage growth. Next slide, please. Right. So this is probably my last slide. So here's where, FDIs and domestic companies can catch up and really invest into their labor force. FDI can invest in training in their people. For example, Samsung and Intel has a training program for engineers graduating out of university. They can partner with vocational schools to educate their workers. And for domestic enterprise, they have to move beyond absorbing graduate, but really have a proper training program that empower and provide skills, analytical thinking to the workforce, so they can really develop their career and move up their corporate ladders. So my final points and the key takeaway is that Vietnam's competitiveness in 2026 is no longer measured by low wages, but by the speed and quality of its workforce upskilling. The workforce dimension is a bridge between attracting capital and achieving long-term industry maturity. And I'll end my presentation there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jack. I do have a follow-up question. In terms of upskilling rapidly, if you look at the FDI and the local companies, what would be the one thing that you think FDIs are good at and which they should improve more at? And local companies, what are they good at and what could they improve at in terms of this upskilling rapidly?
Yeah, I mean, FDI, especially big MNCs are entering the market. I think they realize that they're going in with eyes open. They realize that there's upskilling that's needed in the local workforce, so that they're making the investment, whether they train in-house and have a program to train their skilled workers, or as I mentioned, they have a program with local vocational schools or international technical schools to train their workers. Some of the companies actually do send their engineers overseas, not only to learn, but to work side by side with their colleagues overseas to understand, how proper international engineers work. And for the local companies, they need to move away from the mindset from top down, but really empower the workers for critical thinking, analysis, making decisions, so that they can self-develop and move up the corporate ladder and take over the managerial positions.
Thank you for clarifying that, Jack. I do have one final question, which I've asked all the speakers. And
Sure.
For the next 30 seconds, could you give us your prediction of 2026?
I think we've gone through, from post-COVID, we went through some turbulent times. I think in 2025 was a year of stability. And I think with this week's actually Congress meeting out in Hanoi, there will be a decision on the leaders in the country for the next 5 years. So I think that will bring stability. I think that will bring more confidence in for investments. So I think 2026 will be a year of growth. I don't think it's accelerating yet, but a year of growth, consistent growth. And they've already set 10% GDP growth for 2026. So let's hope we get there.
Fantastic, Jack. Thank you so much for your time. A round of
Thank you,
applause
Christine.
for Jack. There will be some questions as well in the chat. We'd love for you to answer. And welcome again next year so we can hear how 2026 panned out.
Thank
And
you.
also, I must remark, I will talk to NordCham about having 2 Canadian speakers and you ramping up this I don't know what it is around who's going to win what. I'm seeing it on the chatter as well.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you again. So now we're moving on to our next session, which is the rise of the domestic consumer and digital commerce ecosystem. And we are very happy to welcome Ms. Yung Nguyen, who's the Director and Head of Finance Practice at Decision Lab. So welcome, Ms. Yung, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Yung, Head of Finance Practice at Decision Lab. So in my company, I work lots with banks and financial institutions to understand that why the customer make the choice they do, especially when the market conditions and the policy change. The usual Vietnam story you normally hear is a grow a young population and a rising income. So that is true, that remains true. What our data as today is a clearer view on how consumer decision making is changing. Our data not show that it's not a slowdown in the consumption, but a shift in how decisions are made. The consumer are more selective, more deliberate, and more digitally driven. I see 2025 as the year that consumers stop buying on optimism and start buying on justification. So that mindset shift is what set the context for everything that I will share today. So on to the next slide. Yeah, let me anchor this in the sentiment data. On the screen is our index consumer sentiment from second half of 2024 to full year 2025. So across 2025, the consumer sentiment declined compared to late 2024. It was not a collapse, but a clear cooling. So a small rebound in Q4 2025 is important. It shows that the consumer are not panicking, but they are adjusting. So from my experience, this pattern typically signals a shift to a more controlled financial mindset. Looking into 2026, with the personal income tax adjustment that will provide additional support, this is less about a real jump in income and more about confidence. That's a signal that the system is responding. So in practice, this leads to a more disciplined spending. People do not stop spending, they prioritize more. So in the next slide, yeah, this slide will explain the psychology behind that sentiment shift. On the left-hand side is that we ask the consumer how their personal finance compared to 1 year ago. So compared to 2024, the consumer in 2025, they feel less certain about their financial future. They borrow less and they save more. On the right-hand side, we continue to ask them then how the consumer personal finance outlook for the next 1 year. But interestingly, their 1 year outlook remained relatively stable. So this is not fear, it's caution. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can see clearly in the spending behavior. The consumer, they are cutting back on the long-term financial commitment like loans, credit card, and property-related payments. At the same time, spending on daily necessity, personal care, healthcare, and entertainment continue to rise. The takeaway for me is simple. The consumer are protecting their quality of life while limiting the long-term risk. The next slide, please. Yes, as the consumer become more cautious and selective in their spending, this is where many brands and companies get uncomfortable. So in a selective consumption environment, growth in 2026 will not come from being everywhere, but it will come from being present in the moment that still matter. It means that brands need to identify the resilient category, resilient occasion, and resilient needs, then focus the result there with much higher precision. In this context, digital commerce play a critical role here because those platforms increasingly concentrate high engagement, near-term decision, and allowing brands to influence choice when it actually happens. So on the next slide, across all the digital commerce category we track, including online shopping, e-commerce, live streaming, ride-hailing, and food delivery, leadership is increasing, consolidating around a small number of dominant platforms. So you can see from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, Shopee is really lead in the e-commerce. Facebook and TikTok is co-lead on live streaming. Grab lead the ride-hailing. GrabFood and Shopee Food are rivaling in the food delivery sector. So the lists are still growing, but not dramatically year on year anymore. So while followers are largely stagnant. So this makes the leadership position clearer and more interesting. What the most interesting for me is the exceptional case here. So if you look at the Sun SM in the ride-hailing and the TikTok shop in the e-commerce, show that experience can still challenging the scale. So those two platforms are growing the most across all the platforms that we track. So TikTok shop, they won by embedded commerce into entertainment, capturing very high intent moment at the point of discovery and turning attention directly into purchase. While Sun SM, they chose a different battle. They won by delivering consistently high service quality, not by competing on price, promotion, or scale. So this tells us something important for 2026. So disruption is still possible, but only when the experience is truly different, not just slightly better. So on the next slide.
Ms. Young, you have 2 minutes, please.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the real accelerator. 78% of online Vietnamese consumers have used at least one AI platform in the past 3 months. 1/3 interact with AI daily. This is no longer a lead adoption. This is behavioral change. So what surprised me the most is our recent published research about AI and the new financial journey. It's not used for them, but the just development. So in finance, especially AI is already reshaped how the consumer discover research and evaluate between different offerings and products. And finance is a category that requires exceptionally high trust. The consumer increasingly use AI not just to sort, but to validate information. And this makes AI direct rival to the traditional search engine. If you can see in the research study, AI tool only behind search engine a few percentage. And in the consideration type, AI and search engines now at the same penetration of uses. So this shift explains why GEO, the generative engine optimization, it become more important alongside with the traditional SEO. If your brand is not visible, understandable, and readable within the AI-driven responses, you might simply be excluded from the consideration. Yeah, come to the last slide. So let me close my session with 3 truths we believe that will define 2026. The first is growth will concentrate and not expand. So spending continue, but only in fewer categories, fewer platforms, and fewer moments. Second, experience will challenge scale in digital commerce. High intent engagement is concentrated, but differentiation defines who wins. And third, AI is reshape the consumer decision journey. So brand must refresh the customer journey to stay visible, readable, and easy to retrieve across AI environment. So if there's one message that I would leave with you today, is the opportunity in 2026 is not follow the role, but choose the role is still defensible. So that's all of my sharing today.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much,
having
Ms.
me.
Young. Thank you so much for being here. I do have a quick question here. In that summary that you have, is that you're saying growth is becoming more selective. What does it mean in practice on how brands should prioritize their customers? Could you go back to that again?
Yeah. So I understand that there's many speakers before me is actually mentioned a lot about the GDP role rate. So GDP role doesn't automatically translate into day-to-day purchasing confidence. So GDP will combine the production, export, and investment, etc. But the consumer sentiment that I present to you earlier is reflect how people feel about their own income, job security, price, and ability to spend. So in the previous slide that I have presented, there will be some categories that remain resilient. So so the key implication here for brand is like in 2026, if you want to win the Vietnamese consumer, it means you have to choose fewer but resilient segments. Invest in the fewer platform and simplify your customer journey and design for fewer and high intent moments.
Wonderful. And thank you so much, Ms. Young. We've got a couple of seconds left. What's your prediction for 2026?
From my point of view, then the selective consumption will permanently replace the volume-driven growth in Vietnam, even if the economic rebounds. So that's the selective consumption will become the new normal. Because once the consumer learn to prioritize, then it's gonna be difficult for them to unlearn that. So as I shared before, then in order to winning the Vietnamese consumer, you just need to choose where is your resilient battle.
Thank you so much. A big applause to Ms. Young for her deep dive into consumers and what she thinks will happen in 2026. Now we will transition into our next session. Thank you, Ms. Young. We will go into governance. Thank you. We will go into governance, digital and institutional reform, and risk landscape. But we will have three parts of the session. So the first part will be politics and risk landscape with Samuel Persh from RINS and Partners. The second one we will have is digital reform and government transformation with Ms. Nguyen Nguyen from FPT Nordics. And finally, our insight section will be with Rita Mokbel from Ericsson and Min Nguyen from Forbes Mazar, but that will be a panel. So we've got a very exciting set of speakers coming up, so stay tuned. And the first speaker is Sam. Sam, are you there? Can we just spotlight Sam for a moment without the presentation? Hi, Samuel. So we've got you sharing an overview of Vietnam's political, regulatory, and geopolitical risk, and that was a mouthful for me. So I'm hoping that you will be able to pronounce and roll it off your tongue better than I do.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Christina, and looking forward to providing a few comments on this. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from chilly Hanoi. And just by way of brief introduction, I'm a director with Friends and Partners, based, as I said, in Hanoi. We're a consulting firm supporting clients to navigate Vietnamese public policy, regulation, working with the government on improving the business environment for investors across sectors. I spend a lot of my time on technology and energy issues. We also do a lot of work in consumer goods and in healthcare. And so happy to provide a little bit of a view from Hanoi on where things are headed. Are the slides back up? I don't actually see them. Wonderful. So if we could move to the first slide, or to the next slide, I guess. This webinar is happening at a rather opportune moment. Look at the next one. A rather interesting moment, because today, this week, of course, is the Party Congress. So this is a every 5-year event for the party, during which it selects or it formalizes the party leadership for the next 5-year term. This is a major event in the calendar. Oh, sorry, back one slide to the timeline. And really is the moment where the approach the party is taking to its leadership becomes a lot clearer. The new generation of leaders are selected, and then over the course of the next week or so, we will see this formalized by the National Assembly and some major changes across the ministries taking place. We actually had an announcement last night that the Congress will be wrapping up a day or so early, so we finish by tomorrow. So really by the end of tomorrow, we will have a good picture of who the country's leadership is going to be for the next 5 years. This is, of course, is a bit of a process. And so until April 6th, around April 6th, is when we expect post the National Assembly election, the new National Assembly is sitting, will reconfirm everything. But we will really have a good idea going forward on who it is going forward as of the end of this week. So if I go to the next slide, I just want to capture how much is going to actually change. This is just an indicative list, right? On this list, we have the current Politburo of the Communist Party of Vietnam. And you can see everybody there in the darker red shade are officially over age to serve another term. Some people will get a waiver. I think everybody on this call is probably aware that General Secretary To Lam is likely to continue in his role and has indeed is likely to get one of those waivers. But there are quite a lot of other folks on this list who are over age to continue to serve in the Politburo. And so we are going to see some pretty substantive changes to the top leadership of the party the next couple of days. And this is reflected further on down in the government level. A number of the deputy prime ministers, for example, are over age. A number of the ministers serving in individual ministries are over age. And so we are going to get a new set of leaders coming in, both all the way up at that top level of the Politburo, but also in government and the ministries, which is obviously the key touch points for a lot of the companies on this call. I would emphasize that a lot of the new faces coming in are quite young. And I think this will be the first time when we'll have a significant proportion of party leadership, of government leadership, of government ministers who were born after 1970. If you see on this list, pretty much everybody in red was born in the 1950s. You can see a lot of folks in blue born in the early and mid 60s, but you only have one person on that list who was born after 1970. That will change significantly after this transition is done, after the Congress has happened. There'll be a lot of folks who are younger, and as by result of being younger, we'll also have had more opportunity to study abroad, to study internationally, just to be exposed a little bit to new dynamics, other ways of economic policy management. So I think there will be a bit of a generational shift, both in terms of the actual age of people involved, but also perspectives as this new government leadership shakes out over the next couple of weeks. So good to keep an eye on. Again, we'll probably get some announcements tomorrow, it seems like, given the Congress is going to end early, which will give some guidance on who is going to be taking up some of those key roles. But what does that mean in terms of policy vision and direction, right? If people are not the only thing, what's more important for companies is the policy dynamics and the rules of the road that emanate from these institutions of power. So if we go to the next slide, I'd like to spend the second half of my remarks talking a little bit about the reform agenda. So the 2025 was all about structural reform and the creation of a new baseline policy for Vietnam. So on the structural side of things, you're all very well aware of the merger of ministries from over 20 ministries to reduced it by about 5. The merger of the provinces, significant changes affecting the entire country, going from 65 provinces down to the mid-30s. The elimination of the district level, which has had major implications for how everybody interacts with the state, where you get your driver's license, where you change your property deed, where you get your marriage registration. All of these things have changed as a result of these structural reforms. And also, I think one that's undercovered perhaps is trying to address localism concerns and really requiring that provincial leaders, both on the party side and at the People's Committee side, do come from more of a technocratic or external background, are not beholden to local dynamics in the provinces that they govern. And we're also seeing a little bit of an expanded regionalism approach. Ho Chi Minh City, probably the most obvious, where Ho Chi Minh City was expanded basically to become its own region. We heard a lot about how the integration of the different provinces around Ho Chi Minh City is being done to create a unified economic approach. In Hanoi as well, we're seeing more discussions taking place between Hanoi leadership and the provinces that surround Hanoi to try and create a more regional development approach. And then a lot of that was the structural side. And then on the policy side, we had a series of new orientations. People have talked a lot about Resolution 57 on science, technology, and innovation, and that's the foundation for Vietnam's future economic growth. And people have also talked quite a lot about the Resolution 68, putting the private sector at the center of Vietnam's economic development. And more recently, we've had a number of sector resolutions come from the Politburo, talking about the need to develop certain sectors, particularly around energy security, particularly around education and training. That was 2025 and early 2026. Next year, particularly after Tet, will be very focused on implementation. The government is coming out with master plans. There is a long list of pieces of regulation and policy that the different ministries will be developing to realize a lot of this. So we will still be growing building that foundation for policy that companies can then benefit from the clarity there and begin to see growth. But this year, the vision has been the vision has been set by the party. Now it's about materializing that vision. I think perhaps a great example of this is in infrastructure development, where both on the anniversary of the party back in September, and then more recently, there have been some major announcements about huge numbers of new infrastructure projects kicking off. I think the event the other day was 230 something new projects are being implemented across the country, ranging from highways to airports, rail linkages, huge amounts of infrastructure that is being pursued. And we're seeing it already here in Hanoi, and I'm sure folks in Ho Chi Minh City are as well, the evidence of this infrastructure projects kicking off. Things that have been stalled for a long time, now moving forward, investors being selected, concrete really being poured. And so I think this is an example of the vision that's been set over the last 12 or 15 months since the new General Secretary came in, and we have had this new era of reform and streamlining and aggressive pursuit of growth. We now see the implementation of that in areas like infrastructure. And I think we'll see a lot more of that as this new government, this new set of leaders that's going to be selected this week, really come into their positions of authority and settle in. Of course, this is all happening. I'm conscious of time. I'll finish up in a moment, but just one word on the geopolitics of it all, because Vietnam obviously is a very internationally exposed economy. We've heard a lot about that from Jack and the exposure of Vietnam's workforce to global trade dynamics. Vietnam so far has weathered this very well, and they played a very good hand of cards, a very difficult hand they've been dealt. They played it very well in balancing the relationship between China, with China and with the United States. These are two economic powers that Vietnam cannot afford to alienate. And I would expect more of that going forward. There are some pretty sophisticated individuals at the top of the party running Vietnam's foreign policy. They have shown a great ability to build the right kind of relationships, both in Beijing and in Washington. So while it's not going to be easy to manage these sets of superpower relations, I think Vietnam has a very good track record, and there's no reason to think that it won't be able to continue with that in the years ahead.
Thank you so much, Samuel. You always have such a way of delivering a very complicated structure. I'm sure the audience will appreciate this very outline that you have provided us. I do have to ask you as well, what is your 2026 prediction? Love to hear it.
Sure. So my prediction is that the government is finally going to be able to deliver on its public expenditure and public investment goals. We've watched over the last several years the Vietnam government really struggle to spend the money it's budgeted on infrastructure and other areas of public services. I think with the new leadership and a real focus on public investment to drive economic growth, I think this is the year we actually see some of those words turn to action and much better results on public expenditures than we've had over the last couple of years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Sam, and look forward to having you back soon again.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thank you. So now we move on to our second part of this session, which is Digital Reform and Government Transformation with Ms. Lien Nguyen from FPT Nordics. Ms. Lien, welcome, and the stage is yours.
Distinguished guests of Nordic Chamber, Nordic friends, good morning from Copenhagen. My name is Lien from FPT Nordics. Today, I'd like to talk about one simple idea. Reform only matters if it turns into real results for governments, for companies, and for people. Vietnam has chosen digital transformation as a national direction. The question for all of us is how that vision can turn into real value, especially for Nordic businesses. And if you move to the next slide, we can see that governments rarely reform because it's fashionable or because it's cool to have. They reform because the cost of inaction becomes much higher than the cost of change. And you can see Decision 749, it's Vietnam's National Digital Transformation Program, sets very ambitious goals that the digital economy would reach 30 to 35% of GDP by 2030 and 50% by 2045. And already now, nearly 1/5 of Vietnam's GDP is already coming from digital economy. That's the fastest in Southeast Asia. This tells us something very clear. Digital transformation is core to competitiveness. It's no longer optional. And in other words, wait and see is a risk. And in the graph on the right side, you can see that by 2040, AI is expected to inject around 120 to 130 billion US dollars into Vietnam's economy. The implication here is very practical. Companies that adopt AI late won't just be less efficient. They will lose competitiveness to those who embed intelligence early into operations, supply chains, and decision making. And when a country commits to digital transformation and has such a big ambition, its national technology champions must deliver at scale. And that is where FPT steps in. So in the next slide, you can see that FPT began 38 years ago with a very big dream to bring Vietnam into the digital era. And today we have grown into Vietnam's leading ICT group with more than 80 offices around the world, including Denmark and Sweden. We invested early in AI, in data, cybersecurity, cloud, but more importantly, we invested in people. And many of our client logos you can see on the right side are the companies that you might have known well, the global leaders in logistics, manufacturing, energy, you name it. They all have different problems, but one thing they have in common is complexity. And our goal is to help companies innovate with less risks and more speed so that they can turn their strategies into results faster. Companies don't wake up and wanting AI or wanting cloud. They want smoother integration after M&A. They want smarter and more predictable operations. They want faster decisions based on trusted data, platforms that are secured and future ready. And that is the outcome that we focus on and not only buzzwords. In the next slide, you can see that our decision to enter the Nordics was intentional and future-focused. We see this region as one of the most innovative, sustainable, and trust-driven in the world. Those are the values that we share so much, that match so much with our own. And our journey here is still young, but our commitment is long-term. We'd like to grow with the Nordic market and invest in relationships that last. 3 years ago, in September 2022, we opened our Denmark office. And this was more than just a business expansion. It was a promise that FPT is here to stay in the Nordics, to learn from you, to partner with you, and to bring Vietnamese innovation to your doorstep, be it in Vietnam or at your headquarters in the Nordic region. In the next slide, you can see that one of our very first Danish clients was Yuli Sandlau. And in the picture, that was the signing ceremony for their smart factory solution. It was an unforgettable moment, honored by their Majesties, the King and Queen of Denmark and Ambassador Nikolai Prutz on the 50th anniversary of Vietnam and Denmark relations. That moment reminded us that technology is not only about machines and code, it's about trust, culture, and shared values. And thankfully, Julie Sandlau has remained a very happy client ever since, and we're very proud of this partnership. And in the next slide, earlier today, you heard from DSV Vietnam about how supply chains and operations are evolving on the ground. Now we're looking at a different layer of the same story. What happens after growth when you grow so fast and when you scale and when complexity and integration really begin? And rather than me explaining about what partnership means in that context, I am very pleased and grateful that Mr. Per Engelbrecht, Director of Integration and Migration Services at DSV Group, has kindly agreed to join me to share a few words on what collaboration with FPT has meant from DSV perspective. So Per, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Lien. I think I'm sitting in the coldest room at HQ here, so I'm shivering a bit, but let's get on with it. Good afternoon, all. It's an honor and a pleasure being part of FPT's Nordic KickOff 2026, and of course, not least to represent DSV. I'm going to share a few thoughts and my insights on the importance of collaboration in driving our global progress in DSV. And what can I say, as opposed to Eric Herding's brilliant insight into logistics, I will go into the more maybe technical or tangible insight on where we are today. Personally, I think we all do. I find partnerships essential. It's about combining the global expertise and not least muscle of DSV with strong regional presence and support from partners. I see and we see FPT as a strategic partner with the scale and the capacity and capability to support DSV in achieving our goals, not only in Southeast Asia, but across all of Asia Pacific. To give you some background on as to what I do and in what capacity I speak, I can say that we in my area are responsible for strategic enablement, for standardization and consolidation. I'll get to the point on as to why this is important in a minute. We are one of the pillars supporting the overarching enterprise integration. Enterprise integrations are the ones handling the millions of messages daily, internally and externally going in and out of DSV. Messages in this context are booking, shipments, invoices, updates, customs, declarations, and much, much more. Enterprise integration is therefore crucial for DSV, and the entire area is a highly specialized. It's fast-paced and it's volatile. It's all about ensuring data quality and throughput. And why is this important? It is important because not all partners can support this. The man with the vision for FPT was our group CIO, Jesper Riis. And I must admit, and in all honesty, I was in the beginning a bit skeptical, and I was also blissfully unaware of the potential of FPT. Fast forward, I have had the privilege of spearheading the partnership with FPT and have today technical specialists from FPT supporting my area. And they're doing it well, I might add. Partnerships like this is how we tackle complex challenges. It is how we extend our bandwidth, and with that extension, we create new opportunities. It is my firm conviction that the commitment I see from FPT will lay the foundation for a long-term partnership between DSV and FPT. Those were the words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Per. Strong partnership and trust from DSV, the world's largest logistics company, is both an honor and a responsibility that we take very seriously. Last year, our chairwoman, our CEO, and I have traveled across Denmark and the Nordics to meet with clients, to listen and to collaborate. These visits helped us deepen relationships and better understand your challenges. We are committed to supporting Nordic companies, not just as a delivery partner, but as a long-term transformation partner. Vietnam has chosen digital reform as a path to competitiveness. FPT has chosen to carry that responsibility at scale. But transformation is not something we do for you. It must be something that we do with you. We invite you to challenge us with your hardest problems, to partner with us, to build solutions that are sustainable, secure, and future ready. From vision to results, together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lian, and thank you, Per, for this wonderful interaction, also the showcase of your partnership. We look forward to also, on behalf of NordCham, working with you throughout the year on this as well. Thank you so much, Ms. Lian. Now we will move on to the final section of this topic, and this is a panel, an insight section on governance, digital and institutional reform and risk landscape. I've got Rita Mokbel from Ericsson and Minh Nguyen from Forvis Mazars. Could I get them on the screen together with me? Could we step away from presentation mode? Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Do you hear me well? Wonderful.
Hey, you well.
Yes, this is great. So we're doing a little bit of a different tempo for the next 20 minutes, and that is that we have a panel discussion with the two of you. So I know that we talk a lot about Vietnam's digital transformation and how it is accelerating, both in two complementary perspectives. That is the digital infrastructure and enablement with Ericsson, and then it's the institutional reform, governance, and risk with Forvis and Mazars. So as a starting question, could you introduce yourself and at the same time answer this first question? When you look at Vietnam right now, what feels most different compared to just a few years ago? So Rita, let's start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you again, Christina. So my name is Rita Mokbel. I'm president CEO of Ericsson in Vietnam. I'm relatively new to Vietnam, if I can still say that. So I can't compare every detail from years ago. But what strikes me most today is the speed of change. And not only that, it's the confidence behind it. So today I see skylines lit with cranes, solar panels stretching across lands that used to be barren, students learning AI in classroom that didn't exist years ago, and 5G powering innovation from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City. And the numbers actually reflect what we feel on the ground. Throughout the session, we all discussed GDP growth above 8%, but just to put things into perspective, this is 2 times the rate of the global GDP growth and 4 times Europe GDP growth, and around 42,000 5G sites deployed in less than 18 months. In many countries, transformation takes a decade. In Vietnam, it happens in months. You can feel it in the energy of the ecosystem, talking to government, business, academia. All of these are moving in the right direction. And when I speak to all these stakeholders, the message I hear again and again is very simple. We are not just catching up. We are setting the pace.
Thank you, Rita. Over to you, Minh.
Thank you, Christina. And quick introduction. My name is Minh. I'm chairman at Forvis Mazars, and I work a lot with the European business community as vice chair of the NordCham. And for this section today, maybe I just try to share, because I from my own standpoint, because I work a lot in policies. So I'm not really a commercial digital guy, so don't expect too much from me in that sense. A lot of change. If we go back to your question, Christina, just look at the map. We have all the new good things, infrastructure, roads, ports, highways. We even have new provinces in terms of names and boundaries, a lot of change, right? And me as a citizen, now I can do a lot of admin procedures online or using the app, the tax, e-tax or EID. And it's not a super big deal, but for me, it's so interesting because it shows the phase of transition, and it's a new start for a country like Vietnam.
Thank you so much for that, setting the scene and sort of your perspectives on both a professional and personal level. I would like to start off with my next question on digital infrastructure enablement to Rita. So the first question that I have for you, Rita, and in your role as representing Ericsson, is how is the build-up of 5G and digital infrastructure shaping Vietnam's next phase as a digital economy?
That's a great question, Christina, because when we talk about 5G, it usually sounds more technical or technology, but actually it's very human and very economic. Let me start with a simple idea. Every major economic leap in history has been built on strong infrastructure. In the past, it was roads, ports, electricity, and railway. Today, it's the digital infrastructure, and 5G sits at the core of it. Another analogy I would like to share from outside the telecom. In the early 20th century, Germany realized that the future of transportation is not just only building better cars, it's actually building better roads. And the Autobahn that we all know, the fastest highway in Germany, didn't move cars faster. It actually transformed logistics, commerce, the whole competitiveness of Germany, and established Germany as a global automotive powerhouse. So today, 5G plays a very similar role. It's the digital highway. It's not only faster network, it's the backbone of the digital economy. Why is that? Because it connects everything that can be connected. People, machines, industries, securely at that scale. Sorry.
Rita's got so much digital, it's coming out of all corners.
Yeah, so technologies like AI, cloud, automation, smart factories, digital healthcare are powerful, obviously. But for them to scale, they need to have the underlying road that is fast, reliable, secure, and always available. So that is the power of 5G. And this is why Vietnam's approach is so important, because they treat 5G as a critical national infrastructure. So they are not only just upgrading the network, they are building the foundation for the digital economy that they want to become. What does it mean in practice? So first, it means speed and scale. Again, we all are looking for cloud and an AI, but for this to scale nationally beyond offices and data center into real life use cases like factories, hospitals, schools, and cities, you need to have a strong and reliable connectivity so that AI can reach everyone. Second, 5G enables entirely new use cases. If we take today manufacturing, which is one of the most relevant industry in Vietnam, with 5G, factories can connect machines, sensors, and people in real time. So robots can be controlled remotely. Experts can log in from any part of the world, and then through augmented reality can support. And then, of course, AI can optimize production because, of course, of the ultra latency, high reliability of 5G. So this will improve productivity, the quality, and sustainability. Think, for example, about 5G in healthcare. Patients in remote areas can consult specialists in Hanoi, in Ho Chi Minh City, or even abroad. So this will help bridging the gap of accessing quality healthcare, especially in rural areas. And then, of course, those are two industries, two use cases, but this extends to port, aviation, agriculture, transportation. Many of those use cases didn't exist in the past, maybe to a certain extent start to exist today in Vietnam, but with all the investments in this infrastructure, obviously Vietnam is very well positioned to adapt them at scale. And third, the inclusive growth, because a digital infrastructure, a strong digital infrastructure, will improve access to education, will enable efficient digital public services like Min mentioned today. It will create opportunities for small businesses and startups across the country and not only in major cities. Again, why it matters? Because all this digitalization has measurable economic impact. Today, our study shows an increase in mobile broadband. A 10% increase will lead to 0.8% increase in GDP growth. So in another word, connectivity is one of the fastest and most effective levers government can use to accelerate digital and economic development. So simply put it, 5G is Vietnam's digital highway. It's about productivity, competitiveness, quality of life. And as physical highways in the past enabled industrial growth, today we see high-performance digital networks will enable the next wave of innovation and economic growth in Vietnam.
Thank you so much, Rita. I'd like to follow up with one, if you could just answer this second part briefly. As I follow you on LinkedIn, I saw a post that you had posted last week, and you started your presentation here, or your explanation of the first question, a lot about infrastructure. And in your post, you had described, and we're stepping a little bit on the side here, you described AI as infrastructure as well, rather than a technology layer. Can you just explain that and how it relates to Vietnam?
Absolutely. So when I say AI is becoming infrastructure, I mean that it's no longer a standalone technology or feature you just add on, or it's not anymore an offer you provide. It becomes a foundational capability, like electricity, like connectivity, something that everything else is built on. I don't know if you have seen in Davos, Microsoft CEO, he mentioned, as soon as AI becomes the foundation, it's not anymore a bubble. So it's not only just limited to technology. And then this is where we see AI today. It sits in how factory operates, in how healthcare is delivered, is how logistics is run, is how we are delivering our equipment and how we are operating our equipment. And that's why it becomes a technology that is embedded everywhere. And then specifically to my post, I was talking about the partnership between Apple and Google. And then this is a great example. Today, as user of the phone, if you want to use Siri, you don't mind if it is supported or the backend is Gemini or OpenAI, ChatGPT. What you care about as a user is the experience. Is like, that Siri is supporting you the way that you want. So that's why, I said it becomes as AI. And then, of course, what does it mean this for Vietnam? Because for AI to scale in Vietnam, you need to have the foundation. And that's why it needs cloud. It needs to have high performance connectivity. And that's why Vietnam has a real advantage, because they are investing in all these foundations and in digital infrastructure. So they have all the needed conditions for AI to move out of data centers and go into the real use cases, real economy across industries and regions.
Thank you, Rita. And now let's pivot to you, Min, with a focus on institutional reform and risk landscape. So my question to you, Min, from a corporate and investor perspective, what institutional reforms matters most if Vietnam is to fully unlock its digital economy potential?
Well, I think all reforms should start with a significant change in mindset. So now is the time that I do see that there is a change in mindset across the top leadership of Vietnam. Now they clearly specify that the key pillars for growth for Vietnam will be science, technology, and digitalization. And in their eyes, digitalization must be implemented immediately and in full. So it means not really gradually. It's about their investment. So they should be all in for digitalization, right? And then you see a lot of policies coming along with that change. So back to, for example, for taxation, for example, right? So for the first time now, they do allow the double deduction for R&D expense, for example, right? So it means if a company we invest in $10 for R&D, the government will join hands with $4 in terms of tax. So it's a good news, and it's a good start, as I mentioned at the beginning, for the new phase of growth for Vietnam. 2 weeks ago, I had a very good meeting with the steering committee of the Central Party on science and technology and digitalization. And we discussed the action plan for 2026 for Vietnam, because they are going to release a resolution of the Politburo for that. And there are many interesting points. For example, digital economy should make up 15% of GDP this year, and the contribution of science, technology, innovation make up around 18% of GDP. And for infrastructure, 5G coverage, for example, should be for at least 90% of population. So I share and discuss with Rita, and then immediately Rita came back with many good comments and proposals. So we discuss again with the steering committee, and they really appreciate it. So it shows how they are willing and they're open to discuss with private sector and even us foreign companies to drive the agenda for Vietnam. Going back to digitalization, I mean, in my capacity, I'm working with foreign companies doing business here. I think digitalization also brings many business schemes, many business models, new business models. So in terms of control, we do expect governments to be more open, to give us more liberty in doing what we really have to do. Because, it is really about digital, right? So, in Vietnam, for many years, there are control over what we are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do. So for this phase, I believe we should have more liberty. And this is something we have discussed with the governments already. And going beyond digital, I think if we talk about general growth of Vietnam, we still hope that, and we still expect that Vietnam will still stick on green transition, which I think they are. Just a couple of days ago, maybe 3 days ago, for the first time, they introduced a new regulation on carbon market, which is a good news for us. And of course, international collaboration is still a key for us to expect.
Thank you so much, Min. We would love to have more time with both of you, but as we are constrained with time today, I will move on to the question on bridging infrastructure reform and execution. And this question is to both of you. How important is public-private collaboration in ensuring the digital transformation is both fast and resilient, and what needs to improve for it to work better? So Min, I'll start with you.
I will stick to my favorite area, administration. All right. So, when we talk about digital transformation and applied on administration, I mean, administrative procedures. So we pay tax, customs, or apply for work permit or licensing, right? So Vietnam has been trying a lot to improve those platforms for companies to use. And of course, to invest in that, they need resource from private sector for sure. And from private sector, we also want the government to have the better platform for us to plug in and to work on that, right? And I will just take one example. In the past, just a few years ago, when Vietnam introduced the national portal for public services, so we had to spend a lot of efforts to ask companies, ask private sector to use the platform. So only by doing so, the government can have more data. And by having more data, it can help the companies better and can help improve the system better. But it's voluntary, so it doesn't work as well as what we expected. So now they move to what? VNEID, right? And VNEID is something that is mandatory. Going forward, it is mandatory for all companies to plug in. So what I'm trying to say here is the public sector really needs the private sector to join hands in implementation of all of these digital transformation. And that's where we meet together.
Rita?
Yeah, so again, especially in digital transformation, this collaboration between public and private is very essential because it makes it fast and then at the same time resilient. Because in normal cases, when government set the direction, in general, policy, spectrum, security frameworks, the private sector can invest and innovate at scale with confidence. What is great, and from my experience in Vietnam, and Min has mentioned this, the government is very open and appreciative to any idea of innovation, whether in regulation or in execution. So what is important here is how we can together, public and private, work on clear implementation. So faster pilots to scale, deeper ecosystem coordination, so infrastructure can translate into real productivity gains. We need to have a sandbox. We need to have, and then this is where more the private sector can contribute, platform for innovation, and this is why you can translate all the government vision into concrete outcome and results.
So I have my final question for both of you, and I'm sure you know what the question is because I've asked every speaker in the last sessions. And what is your prediction for 2026? So if we go back to Min, in brief, what do you think will happen in 2026?
For me, 26 will be a year of full opportunities for all of us, right? Because it's the first year of adopting a lot of new policies. So it opens up a lot of opportunities for all of us, for infrastructure, for new services, and for ourselves as well, where we support companies doing business here. So I really look forward to those opportunities.
Rita?
I also believe my prediction is Vietnam will make a historic leap. They will move from being one of the world's fastest adopters of digital technology to become a true digital powerhouse. We will see more innovation in semiconductors. We will see semiconductors more designed in Vietnam, commercial drones and robots export to ASEAN countries. So they will not be only content deploying or transforming their own industries, but they will also produce and then take it away. We will see first wave of Vietnamese SMEs rising to become top tier 1 players in global supply chain. I also believe that Vietnam will make a big shift in digital transformation in terms of doubling the productivity gains in manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, and finance by bringing all this digital transformation across different industries. So in short, 2026 will not be only about setting the pace, it will be about accelerating the pace.
Fantastic. A round of applause to both Min and Rita for their very important insights. We've had a short time with both of you. I'm sure many others will like to reach out to you and gain more insights. And I'm sure NordCham will provide that platform. Thank you again, Rita and Min. A round of applause to you. I'm getting hearts and applause on the screen for you,
Thank you.
if you don't see them. Thank you. Now we're moving on to our last session of the day, and that is the green energy transition with Alessandro Antonielli. Oh my goodness, Alessandro, I hope I did not destroy your name. Senior Representative at CIP, and Antoine Croiset, Country Manager at Vestas. Oh my goodness, the Italians and the French have really made me stumble over your name. So I might have to ask you to pronounce them better than I did. So we are really excited to bring both an investor perspective and a technology perspective. And I'm actually really delighted to moderate this session. Why? Well, my sustainability background, but here I'm really seeing how green transition has moved from a sustainability topic to a core part of day-to-day business and investment. So that makes it super, super exciting. So can I just ask, as I've just really mispronounced your names, if you could say it again and tell a little bit about yourself, and then I can go straight to the first question. So if I start off with you, Alessandro, please, how do we pronounce your last name?
You pronounce it well. Christina,
my name
is Alessandro Antonioli, and I work for Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. That is a fund dedicated to large-scale energy transition projects and operates in more than 30 countries and manages more than $35 billion and a portfolio of 110 gigawatts of projects around the world.
Antoine.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you. You got it right as well, Christina. It's Antoine Croiset,
okay.
so really good job for that. And I recently took the role of country manager for Vestas Vietnam. I've been in the region for 10 years, but just recently joined in Vietnam, and Vestas manufacturers install on service wind turbines across the world. In Vietnam, it's an important market for us in APAC. We have 1.6 gigawatt of installed capacity, and we are looking for much more for the years to come.
Fantastic. Thank you for helping me out there. That really relieves my moderating duties in many ways. I would love for both of you to set the scene, because we talk a lot about green energy or energy in general. So again, the question, why is renewable energy so important and why does it still matter? So if you could just briefly set the scene from your side, Alessandra, and then Antoine.
It matters because it matters for the people. People want to live in better cities, and they want to have leave a legacy to their children that is a world that is better than the one they found. They don't want to feel guilty when they consume products. They want to feel like they are paying a fair price for the energy they consume that doesn't affect the livelihoods of other people negatively. If anything, they have high expectations on green energy. They want it to improve the life of the communities and to provide better jobs for themselves and for the people surrounding them. So having green energy does matter, and I had this reflection internally for many, many years, and current reasoning still challenges why would you go for expensive renewable energy when you have cheap oil and gas derived energy. And this is a difficult but necessary explanation that we need to give to countries like Vietnam, whose existence of the very fragile ecosystem is depending on managing the natural resources effectively.
Antoine?
I think from my point of view, when we look at Vietnam, we are looking at a country which is targeting 8 to 10% GDP growth. So with this growth, it will increase as well the energy consumption of the country. And to meet this demand quickly on that scales, renewables are not an option, basically. They are just essential. Solar and wind especially can be deployed at much faster rate than traditional power plants. And this will be critical for Vietnam for the energy security of the country. I think in terms of economics as well, we have seen that solar and wind have become more and more competitive for the past years. And now we have the energy that are really competitive. It provides as well very long-term view. The PPA usually for solar and wind are kind of fixed for 20 years. So there is no dependency on fossil fuels variations on the long term. So in terms of growth, in terms of economics, it just makes sense.
Thank you so much for sort of telling both perspective of why it's important in terms of that green energy, but also the part is the increased use of energy, and that one has to have a combination, if not to pursue green energy down the line. So the way the session is built is what has been and what are we going to look forward. And I would like to start the question to you, Alessandra, looking back at 2025. What was the single most important change for Vietnam's green energy transition?
So there has been a wave of regulatory changes in 2025 that definitely started to clarify the picture in the local conditions for international investors, particularly, that have been giving a lot of hope for new projects in the country for quite some time, but actually we have seen a stalling of the, if not the deterioration of the investment conditions over the last 3 years. So 2025 has seen some important pieces of regulations being issued. So I think for me, the one that is probably the most relevant is the Decree 57 on the direct PPA, because that's very specific. It starts to give a quite specific frame on how you can sell your power privately outside of the public network, and therefore, for an investor perspective, it means that you have an alternative route to market that is not just dependent on the network operator, helping you de-risking the project and helping you potentially to get a higher price for your power. So I think that's a piece of legislation is quite important. There's still some work to be done on it, but definitely it gives some hope that actually many projects off-grid would be investable in the near future.
In a similar fashion, Antoine, if we look at what's been happening in 2025, from the technology and supply side, how did 2025 change how you view Vietnam's market readiness?
Yeah, I think from our side, maybe to give a bit of history about Vestas' experience in Vietnam, there has been a big boom, especially in wind energy, around the year 2019 to 2021. This is where Vestas has installed most of our capacity that we have currently in Vietnam. And after the market has been slowing down from 2021 to today, we were waiting for more clarity and more regulatory framework, basically to support developers and investors to move forward on their project. I think the main turning point for us in 2025 has been the adoption of the PDP-8, which is a power development plan of Vietnam. And it gives kind of the vision on the regulatory framework to developers and our customers to move forward finally on their project. And there have been a lot of projects that have been in the pipe for a couple of years waiting for this new PDP-8, and it has been announced this revised PDP-8 in April 2025, and we hope it will really accelerate the renewable energy sector from 2026 onwards.
So Antoine, staying with you, if we look at what's happening just now, we've looked behind like 2025 and behind. What is happening now and what is going to happen in the year ahead? So what to expect in 2026 and beyond? What for Vestas will become easier and what will be challenging?
I think what I expect at the moment, our perspective is that the momentum is clearly picking up in Vietnam. We have really increased our discussion with developers, investors, and it's just not about work on paper, but we have clear plan of sight in terms of timeline and execution of the project. So what we expect from 2026 from Vestas is that we expect our first projects for the past few years to come in the country, and we expect to install a couple of 100 megawatts in the market for the next couple of years. I think that's on the positive side, but we see still some bottlenecks in the market. I think currently we do have the vision with the PDP8, the target volume on timeline. But in terms of implementation, there are still some bottlenecks that we see in the market. It's not something that we think would be unachievable in the next few months, but we need definitely clarity on a few topics to really move those projects to reality.
And similar to you, Alessandro, so what should businesses and investors prepare for over the next year, 2, 3 years, in terms of your opinion and background?
So I would expect that they should expect a slowly developing regulatory frame. I wouldn't expect that all the problems will be sorted in a matter of months. I think it's going to be slow, and I think the good investors should be able to capture the signals from those pieces of regulations and try to act proactively. So being able, they should engage, I think, with reliable partners early on and look at and analyze these risks upfront and have mitigation plans based on how the conditions are going to evolve. I think they can expect some major projects, not necessarily renewables, to see final investment decision or roundabout this year. I'm thinking mostly about LNG projects that have been in the pipeline for quite some time. But I think LNG is a good, if they progress, I think they're going to offer also a good sign for renewables, because they will help the network operator to have confidence that they will be able to manage a higher penetration of renewables, as network is obviously one of the biggest bottlenecks now to more development of renewable energy.
I'm really interested to hear from both of you. I'm wondering if this question is going to throw you up. What is actually the biggest priority for the year ahead for each one of you that you can share? I'm not sure you can share all your strategy plans for 2026, but if you could share one, that would be amazing. What is it that you are driving forward the most, or one item for 2026? Alessandro, as you were speaking, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think we would hope actually to be able to launch the offshore wind market finally in Vietnam. So we had some very good results recently. So we hit very good milestones. So for 2026, I think we hope to hit a major de-risking block that we see in the development of the Nam Chum Bo 1 project in the south of Vietnam alongside our partner PVN. And that would be, I think, almost a watershed moment for, I think, for the renewable industry, because these are massive infrastructure projects that might revive the local international supply chain. And I really hope that there will be the participation of international OEMs to this industry.
Antoine.
I think from our side, the main focus for 2026 will be more on the onshore wind sector, because we just see that this will be faster to implement. But of course, we are looking as well at offshore and see how we can support our customers, such as CIP, to support them in their plan to develop the first offshore projects in Vietnam.
And now on to the final question, which I'm sure you've been thinking about since the get-go. What is your moonshot prediction for 2026? It can be both personal and professional. We are recording it, and we'll keep it in the pocket to see if it's actually going to materialize or not. But go ahead, Antoine. What's your moonshot prediction for 2026?
I think maybe I'm too new and too positive on this, but I think we will see a couple of, at least for onshore wind, we will see a couple of 100 megawatt going through a final investment decision in 26, and especially with an acceleration in the second half of 2026.
Alessandro?
So I would try to look at the energy transition piece in general, so not just renewables. So if we think also gas to power, I think probably there will be about $5 to $10 billion of projects that are going to see a final investment decision in 2026. And more importantly, I hope that there will be many people who will find green jobs interesting, and therefore I hope green jobs will become cool in Vietnam. and we'll have many people interested in joining the energy transition of their country.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And with that, I want to say thank you to both of you, Antoine and Alessandro, for this session. At the end of the session, of all the sessions and end of the day, this has been really fantastic. A round of applause to you and a big thank you, and look forward to welcoming you back for our next event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I would like to say actually a very big thank you to all speakers and everyone in the audience for insightful contributions, both on screen and in the chat. It's been really quite fantastic. I do want to say a special thanks to the NordCham team, which is David, Roses, Nyet An, again, the NordCham board and members. And for my side, it's been such a pleasure to moderate. And now I hand off for the final words to the wonderful Tuve. And Tuve, I see you're already on screen, and that's great. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Christina. What an afternoon this has been. Huge thanks to everyone contributing and participating. And I think, Christina, if people still have a few applause left on the applause button, then do give some up for Christina for fantastic moderating here. And she's far away in Australia, so she doesn't even get to enjoy the champagne with the rest of us in a few minutes here. Thank you so much. I think this overall, my take out is that the overall picture is cautiously optimistic. This will be a strong year for Vietnam. We've heard about ambitious reform agenda, investments in both public and private sectors. There's a strong ambition from the leadership, and I think we're all waiting with interest to see what comes out of the Party Congress. That is the other big event in Vietnam beside the Nordic KickOff at the moment. But I think moving forward with caution is still a good thing. As my colleague from Decision Lab also shared, the growth doesn't necessarily trickle down on everyone. I used to tell my team to change to this little bit more slow period in Vietnam, that every quarter we will look to the left and to the right and to the left again before we cross the street. And the important thing for leaders to remember in Vietnam is that no one in Vietnam have ever looked to the sides before crossing the street before. So this is an entirely new situation where that we all need to adapt for. We can play a role together here. I foresee new Nordic investments in the coming year. I see a huge opportunity for the Nordic countries to act as a gateway for Vietnamese companies entering Europe, because it is much more complicated to enter Europe than many other markets. And that might be that despite having a free trade agreement, growth is increasing with US and not with Europe. So I think there's an important role to play there. But I do foresee that there are a lot of things we can do together, and therefore my moonshot for this year is that NordCham for the first time will reach 200 members. And unfortunately, I understand David, our executive director, have just logged off to go and start up the networking event. So he's not hearing this, but it will of course be in our targets. And I really need the support from the whole community to get us there. It's an important milestone for us in terms of really establishing ourselves as a community here in Vietnam. I hope that this fast-paced kickoff has given you knowledge and tools to start the year in the best possible way. And I really hope to see you all shortly here in Ho Chi Minh City at Bartels, or for those of you joining the Swedish ambassador as his resident in Hanoi. I wish you a really good party and second half of the kickoff. So with that, Happy New Year.
This job isn't for everyone. always fighting the elements.
Not because we're asked to,
but because it's simply who we are. Being everywhere at the same time.
every time zone, every terrain, every city. We understand how the everyday
requires the extraordinary.
Seeing the world as it is and how it should be.
Sure, there may be early mornings.
And occasional late nights. But it's worth it.
So this job isn't for everyone.
This job, it's for everyone.